He said I had too many guests. I explained my sister was living with me temporarily after her divorce. He said, we didn't agree to take in strays. The next day, someone filed a noise complaint. It was him.
I didn't respond.
I just sat quietly, watching, waiting. And now I know exactly what he's hiding behind that locked basement door. So this happened a few months ago. I, 34F, own a small 2-bedroom house in a suburb just outside Dayton, Ohio. It's not huge, but it's mine. Quiet street, mostly older neighbors. I've lived here for about 5 years without any major issues until recently. My sister, 31F, went through a brutal divorce. Her husband cheated, drained their savings, and then moved out of state. She was a wreck. She also has 2 kids, one's 7, the other is 5. I didn't even think twice. I told her she could stay with me as long as she needed. It was tight. The kids took my guest room. My sister crashed on the couch most nights. We kept to ourselves. No loud music, no guests, nothing out of the ordinary. Just a lot of bedtime stories and early mornings with cartoons. You know, normal stuff. That's when my neighbor, Mr. Greg Fields, he's around 60, retired, lives alone, started acting weird. He came to my door one afternoon. No hello, no smile, just stood there with his arms crossed and said, "You've got a lot of guests lately." I was caught off guard, so I just explained calmly that my sister and her kids were staying temporarily. I even offered a little laugh, like, "Yeah, full house these days." He didn't smile. He just said, "We didn't agree to take in strays," and walked off. I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say to that. Strays? Like my family was some kind of burden to the neighborhood? The next day, I got a knock on the door from a cop. Someone had filed a noise complaint. He said there was a report of constant shouting and child disturbances. The officer was polite and clearly didn't see anything wrong, but still, it was official now. I knew exactly who did it. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront him. I didn't knock on his door. I just sat on my porch that night, drinking tea, watching his house. And that's when I noticed something. His basement window had light coming from it. Not just once, every single night. From around 9 p.m. to well past midnight. Sometimes I'd hear weird sounds, whirring, clanking like tools or machinery. Once I saw a delivery guy drop off a huge box. Greg didn't even open the door, just rolled it into his garage later. My gut told me something was off. So, I started paying attention. Every night, like clockwork, he went down into the basement. Never during the day. Only after it got dark. Once or twice, I saw him outside talking to delivery guys, always quick, quiet, and then right back inside. I never told my sister. I didn't want to scare her or the kids. Then one night, it was a Friday. I saw Greg rush out of the house around 11 p.m. He looked flustered, and he didn't lock his basement door. I sat there, watching the door, heart pounding. After about 15 minutes, I got up. I walked across the lawn and down his driveway. I wasn't proud of it, but I pushed the basement door open. It was unlocked. I didn't go far. Just a few steps down. The room was lit with bright fluorescent lights. There were rows of computer monitors, cables everywhere, and a wall of folders in plastic bins. Dozens of them. Some were labeled with names I recognized, including mine, my sister's, even my niece's names. I didn't touch anything. I backed out slowly and walked straight home. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called a lawyer friend. Then I called the police. They got a warrant, and what they found was worse than I imagined. He'd been running some kind of illegal surveillance setup. Drones, hacked cameras, hidden mics placed around the neighborhood. He had videos, audio files, notes. He'd been watching us. All of us. For years. Greg was arrested 2 days later. I didn't even see him get taken away, apparently. He was cooperative. He never said a word to me after that. The news spread fast. Not just on our block, local TV picked it up too. Suburban man accused of spying on neighbors for years. They showed pictures of Greg being let out in cuffs. People couldn't believe it. He'd lived there over 20 years. Always quiet. Always alone. For a little while, people came up to me like I was some kind of hero. "Good thing you caught him," they'd say. Or, you were brave to go in there. But the truth is, I didn't feel brave. I felt sick. I felt watched. I kept wondering how long he'd been tracking us, what he'd seen, what he'd heard. Then things got worse. About a week after his arrest, I started getting weird mail. No return address. The first was just a manila envelope with a flash drive inside. No note.
No explanation.
I didn't open it, I gave it straight to the police. The second one came 3 days later. Another envelope, this time with printed photos. Of me. Of my sister. Of the kids. Some were from the backyard, others were through windows. One was from inside my house. That's when I completely lost it. I started tearing through every inch of my place looking for hidden cameras. My sister took the kids and spent the weekend at a friend's house. The police said they didn't know how the photos got there. They were investigating, but they weren't making promises. Greg was still in custody. So who was sending them? Then I remembered something. That night I went into his basement, I never checked the garage. I'd seen him wheel the big boxes in there, but I never thought to look inside. I brought it up to the detective. He paused, looked at his notes, then said, "We haven't gone through the garage yet." 2 days later, I got a call. They found something. There were 6 more boxes, all filled with electronics. But one of them had folders, different from the ones in the basement.
These were about me.
Not just basic notes, full, detailed logs. My routines. What I ate. What shows I watched. Arguments I'd had with my sister. Things I didn't even remember saying. One of the pages had a hand-drawn floor plan of my house. Another one had a list of dates and times labeled. Inside access. That's when the detective looked me in the eye and asked, "Has anyone else had keys to your house?" I said no. But then I stopped. I remembered something from months ago, before my sister moved in. I had hired a guy off Craigslist to fix a plumbing issue in the laundry room. He was polite. Seemed normal. But he'd been alone down there for over an hour. I dug through my emails and found his info. I passed it to the police. A week later, they linked him to Greg. He wasn't just a plumber, he was a guy Greg paid under the table to plant devices. And he wasn't the only one. Turns out Greg had a small network of guys like that, former handymen, tech geeks, even a mailman. Paid in cash, given vague instructions. Most of them had no idea what they were really helping him do.
But a few did.
My house wasn't the only one. The police eventually found cameras hidden in 6 homes on our street. Some had been there for years. They even found old footage backed up to cloud servers Greg had tried to wipe. That's when people stopped calling me brave. Now, they looked at me like I'd opened a door that should have stayed shut. And maybe I had. A few neighbors stopped talking to me altogether. It wasn't outright anger. Just distance. Cold stares. Avoidance. Like maybe, in their minds, I had something to do with it. Or maybe they just didn't want to be reminded that it all started with my house. One afternoon, I found a note shoved into my mailbox. It was printed, no handwriting, and it said, "You should have minded your business." That night, I installed security cameras around the front and back of my house. Real ones. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't sleep much either. Then, a twist I never saw coming. My sister got a call from her ex-husband. They hadn't spoken in months, not since the divorce finalized. She didn't answer the first few times, but he kept calling. Finally, she picked up on speaker, so I could listen too. He said he'd been contacted by someone asking questions about her, someone who claimed to be writing an article about the surveillance case in Ohio. They asked if she had mental health issues, if she was a stable mother, if she'd ever acted paranoid. He thought it was a reporter. I didn't. I hung up and called the detective immediately. He said they'd had a data breach. Someone, still unknown, had accessed some of the seized files from Greg's computer system. They couldn't confirm how much had been taken. Could have been a name list. Could have been entire video archives. All we knew was that whoever got in knew what they were looking for. And somehow they were still watching. Things escalated from there. One morning, I found my front door unlocked. I never leave it unlocked, not with the kids here, not after everything. But there it was. No signs of a break-in, no damage. Just unlocked. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was moved. Except one thing, a single folder from my home office drawer. The one that held the letter I wrote to the police the night I decided to go into Greg's basement. That letter was gone. That wasn't the worst part. Later that day, I got an email. No sender address, no subject. Just a photo of that letter, with one line typed under it. There are things worse than being watched. That's when I lost it. I packed a suitcase. My sister and the kids, too. We went to stay at a motel 30 miles out. I didn't tell anyone where we went, not even my closest friend. But the fear didn't leave. I started wondering, what if Greg wasn't acting alone? What if someone else had been funding him? What if I'd walked into something way deeper than I realized? The detective kept me updated, barely. They were still tracing IP addresses, still trying to figure out where the leak came from. But I could tell from his voice, they didn't feel in control anymore. And then came the final twist for now. At the motel, after a week of laying low, we were finally starting to relax. The kids were watching cartoons. My sister was asleep. I stepped outside to smoke and get some air. I glanced at the car parked across from us. A silver Ford Taurus. Same one that had driven slowly past our house 3 separate times last month. There was a man in the driver's seat. He was holding a tablet. And he was watching something. I got closer. Not enough for him to notice. But close enough to see one thing on that screen. A paused video. It was from my backyard. From a night 2 months ago. Me sitting alone on the steps, drinking tea. I don't know who he was, or how much more they've seen, or what they're still planning. I just know I don't feel safe in my own home anymore. I keep trying to go back to normal. Wake up, make coffee, help with homework, but every shadow feels like a camera now. And sometimes I wonder if I'd just stayed quiet, if I hadn't gone into that basement, maybe none of this would have happened. But then I remember the look on my niece's face the night I caught her whispering into the vent, asking if the man downstairs could hear her sleep. And I think maybe the truth didn't ruin everything. Maybe it just showed me what was already broken.